we finished our slide dealing with the love of Christ, and in a very powerful way. Well, when you use more than one program, you forget where you are. There's so much in the Bible that is so powerful when you take the time to spend time with it. It's very economic with words, and yet practically all the words carry a lot of power within them as God communicates with His people. I'm glad that the apostles weren't given more to write, because that would give us more to study. But what they have given us, what the Holy Spirit has given us through the Scriptures, strengthens us. And if we really get a hold of it, it can truly change and transform our lives. As well as some of the good things and the easy things in Scripture, there's lots of things that are challenging. And as we looked at a couple of weeks ago, the holiness of God, and understand His holiness and purity, and then look at our own lives, there's a little bit of a contrast there that helps us to feel humble, if nothing else, that God, an awesome God like He is, loves us anyway, and that's an amazing concept to understand. And that love is demonstrated in these two passages we're looking at. But as well as His love for us, He then, unfortunately, challenges us to respond to that love, to be lovers of people. I remember Bill Wilson many years ago, he said, God wants me to love people. He didn't say I should like them. There's a sort of fine distinction in there, isn't there, really? That is very true. There's some people that are very lovable, and we have no problem with them at all. But there's a lot of people out there who we find difficult to interact with and really look upon with an attitude of love through, as God's eyes, through Christ, and see them as people worthy of the gospel of Christ. It's really a difficult thing for us to talk to people about Jesus in many different circumstances. But it's even more tragic when we make some sort of executive decision about somebody and think, well, they are not good enough. They are not worthy of hearing about Christ. And that really, we should get wrapped over the knuckles for that. We're human beings, so it's part and parcel of who we are, but it's something that we really ought to struggle with and want to do better with. We have no right to withhold the gospel from people. And in times past, and in your situation as well, Paddy, with people can you deal with, I have known people who, because of the love of God, can turn drink into furniture. They can turn lives around when they catch a glimpse of the graciousness of God and the grace that's found in Christ. And that makes it difficult, because sometimes when we see them as they were, we have the imagination of Jesus to see them as they could be. But then again, when we look at our lives, when we see us as we were, then we're astounded that God could see in us something worth saving, and that He could make something out of us. It's a constant challenge for us. And this passage here, you have heard it said, you shall love your neighbour and hate your enemy. I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. I don't like these passages. I struggle with these passages. I remember when I used to live in Northbrook. I was a little bit younger then, and it was a foggy night. We were sitting comfortably in front of the television, and we had a big wall outside around our garden, and all of a sudden there was a huge smack on the wall, and this muddy effort with a stone in it actually had come over the wall and smacked into it. Because you couldn't see very far, so the two kids on the other side of the wall, they knew they were safe, because nobody would be able to find them in that kind of night. Of course, they underestimated me, and my response to having the window always broken, and the next thing they knew, I had rugby tackled the two of them and had them in the mud. Looking back on that, I'm not really proud of that, okay? This passage here says something different, and I struggle with that. because I know me. I'm not the kind of person that finds it easy to love my neighbour.
Do we have to keep all the words of God in order to go to heaven?
No, thank God for that. The
Because
real...
you know why I'm asking this? It's not only you. I can tell you that 98%
of people struggle with
Christians
this.
can never keep this word.
They just struggle with this, don't they?
I think there is a distinction between loving people and liking people.
I think so, yes.
You know, you may not like some of the criminals, but if you love them,
Seeking
the
the highest
definition of love,
Yeah.
strictly speaking, is to seek one's highest good.
Yes, yes.
Now, if you're wanting the best good for that person, you can want that without wanting to put your arms around him.
And at the same time, when you define that further, I mean, seeking your highest good doesn't mean to just let people off with things.
No.
So there's an element of whatever is best for that person might be to restrain that person. That might be you know, what's best for them at the time. So there is a realistic element. I mean, God's not wanting us to be mamby-pamby with everybody in some sort of wishy-washy way. It's a hard concept. It's the same concept. God loves us while we are still sinners. And therefore we are challenged to love others while they are still sinners. But sadly, sometimes we are kind of, we'll love you if you improve. We'll love you if you make the effort. We'll love you if you make a distinction.
No, it said love your enemies. No, like if you thought someone was your enemy, sort of hated them a bit, yeah. But then, you know, he turns round and asks for a cup of water because they were in trouble, and you said no. Do you know what I mean? No.
Yes.
They'd want you to say yeah and give them it. Or
Yes.
if you're freezing, you know, give them a jacket. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, it's an interesting thing in the middle of the Second World War and the First World War, I believe, at Christmas, and remembering Christ, they would have an armistice for that day, and they'd be playing football with each other.
Football, yeah.
And then next, you know, as soon as the day was over, they'd be knocking themselves,
Shoot
you know,
each other.
firing bullets at each other. It's a crazy thing, but there in the middle of a battlefield for just 24 hours, you had a physical demonstration of what it means to love your enemy. That was absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy. And yeah.
I was going to say, one poet said, I died for freedom, this I know, the ones who bade me fight have told me so.
The ones who made me fight.
The ones who bade me fight have
Yes.
told me so.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a really difficult subject in a sense. We're dealing with all the time in a lot of the Bible. We're dealing with the ideal. This is what God challenges us to be. This is what God challenges to be to look for. But it's an interesting concept. There is a lot of people who think that they need to do good as Christians in order to be saved. They need to go some sort of, you know, a checklist. If I do this, this, and this, and this, and this, then God will accept me on those terms. God accepts nobody on a checklist terms. God accepts people through the blood of Christ and our acceptance of the blood of Christ. And therefore, whatever we do as Christians is not to work our way to heaven. It's because we're already saved that we want to do. It's out of appreciation. That's a huge difference. We want to serve the Lord Jesus Christ because of our saved status, our preferred status, our children of God. He says, this is what I see you as. The reality is we're nowhere near it.
Yeah.
But we then must act. Not must act. We want to act as He wants us to be. Because He's accepted us when we weren't really worthy of being accepted. So it's a wonderful concept. And that's why often in our studies we'll talk about, you know, when you do stuff for Christ, you shouldn't be doing it because you have to. You should be doing it because you want to. And that's a huge difference in mind attitude. Not because we want to be saved, but because we already are saved. That's just mind-blowing. God wants us to be a child of His and to spend eternity with us, and through the blood of Christ He accepts us on those terms. Therefore, what kind of person ought we to be? We want to be the best. You know, a lot of it is like a child who gets praise from a parent, and he wants to please that parent because the parent has already praised him. He wants to do even better for the parent. That's a poor illustration, but at the same time, that's what it's all about as well. So
on that point of liking people,
yeah.
Years ago I preached in the vicinity of Cardiff University, the medical school there, and a young man, after I'd left, a young man came into a service, long hair, scruffy, torn clothing, and he asked to be baptized. Well, they thought, this is not going to last, you know. They looked at him. In fact, he was quite dirty, quite frankly. Worse than the normal students, really, he was. I had a letter from him, an email from him, just a few weeks ago, from a hospital in Nigeria, where he's practically running the hospital. Bob Whittaker's his name. He's been out there for 40 years.
40 odd years.
When you looked at him, they said, this is not going. This is the folk in Cardiff said, this is not going to last. You know. But that's Bob Whittaker.
He's an amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you
and
ever,
he's virtually running the hospital there. Yeah. It's a hospital run by the church.
It's an interesting. If he ever, I don't doubt he will, but hopefully somebody, some point, will actually write his biography, because it's an amazing story.
Yeah.
And really, in our lifetime, that is something. It's a privilege to know somebody like that. He was actually, at one time, he was actually kidnapped by the people there, and he wasn't treated very nicely at all.
That's right.
But I remember reading about a situation where he was a surgeon. He became a surgeon, and he was doing operations, and it was on a car headlamps, where the lighting that he was under to do these operations in the middle of nowhere, and amazed with the stuff he had to work with was rubbish as well. And he found a lot of ladies in the country were in dire straits, especially after childbirth. And so he came back to Britain, and he took a special course on paediatrics in order to go back then and go back and serve in his country. Really, very unique.
He was persuaded to give his life to the mission work by a chap that I met in Abilene, Texas, a really old doctor surgeon. And he persuaded Bob to go as a doctor to Africa, and that's where he spent his life.
I know of Frank, maybe slightly embarrassed, but Isabel's sister Ruth and her husband Reg, they were missionaries in Papua New Guinea, and I always thought it was great, you know, amazing experience. That someone like trekked 14 days by foot just to get to where they wanted to be, and eventually he actually built a small airstrip to let things come in and out a lot quicker. But there was a documentary only about a couple of months ago about Papua New Guinea, and I'll tell you, my respect for Reg and Ruth suddenly went through the roof, because the people that they were dealing with in the tribes in that area, they are rough people, violent people, and the problems they have on the big cities at the end of the coast in Papua New Guinea are absolutely horrendous. And if you hurt one of somebody's family, if you kill them or beat them up or something else, you've got 10 of their family coming after you, and then when they've dealt with you, then your family go after them. And it's a non-ending cycle.
If you killed anybody by accident on the road, they would kill you. We had a letter from Ruth. She said, I'm alone in the Warrior Valley. They had to walk for 3 days to get there, by the way, up and down. She said, I'm alone in the Warrior Valley. She said, on Saturday night, a couple of the members came to stay with me, and they were telling me that their parents were cannibals. She said, we ate peanuts. Pretty wild, really wild.
And I remember a story Ruth telling at one time. There was some of the men of the of the tribe disappeared. And they discovered that they were the dinner for the other,
Other tribes.
yeah, other tribes had decided to have lunch.
Yeah.
And you think, goodness, we've got it easy over here. I mean, Corby's bad, but it's not that bad, It's horrendous. So my respect went up a great deal.
But I still on this.
And the practical, yeah, because it's loving your enemies. I mean, it's a hateful situation they were walking into, and yet despite what they saw and what they had to deal with, they would love them. And the same with Bob and his situation, where even they being kidnapped by the very people that he's there to help, and the families he's there to help, and he ends up being kidnapped by the same people. And even after his kidnap experience, which was a horrifying experience, he goes back and works with them even more. That's the practical reality we're going to say.
Yeah, apart from the love we're talking about here, if you look at the second paragraph there, he says, pray for them. And today, the point is, instead of believers praying for those that persecute them, they bear grudges.
Yes.
So it's contradicting, because I believe that God do not want us to bear grudges.
No.
So this praying for them is a direct command, which we should practice.
Well, we should, because I mean, I think years ago, when somebody, I was talking to somebody about this kind of situation, and somebody really struggled with this other individual, and that was the good advice that we learned from this back then. He said, well, if you put him on your prayer list every night, if you make a prayer list of, in general, things you want to pray about, and you put that person's name on him, it's amazing how that will change your attitude to what. You can't pray for somebody every night and still have the same hostility towards them. Because the very act of talking to God about this individual and wanting the individual's life to be changed by God, you recognize that you and God are working as a team, and therefore, as well as praying about them, is there any tangible thing that you can do to perhaps help to change this individual's attitudes and actions? Paddy in his work, it's a truism. You can't help somebody until they're willing to recognize they've got a problem and want to be helped. But in the meantime, while you're waiting for them to get to that point where you can help them, then to hold them up before God in prayer, it's got to be a strong element, because you're thinking about them in a positive way. And that's, when you hate somebody, or when if somebody's your enemy, it's very difficult to think of positive things to think about them. But if you're going to pray about them, then you have got to take the time to think about that individual. And perhaps maybe that opens you up to why on earth has he got himself in that situation. And perhaps there are extenuating circumstances that then you begin to become aware of. Because nobody lives in isolation. A person doesn't become a hateful person overnight. Their mother loves them, if nobody else. Somebody loved them at some point before they got to that point in time. But it must be very difficult. I remember the stories of some of the people in Northern Ireland, where just after a bombing situation, where their children had been bombed to bits, a mother or even a father, in both situations, would turn round and the media were saying to him, how do you feel? Well, for the media, how do you expect people to respond to that? How do you feel? I've just had my children blown apart before my... How do you feel? But to be able to say, look, I'm going to practice forgiveness. I recognize that in this conflict, the polarization of people, that could have been me. I could have been in the bottom. I could have, in different circumstances, I could be on that side and I could be in that situation. It could have been me doing the bombing. And therefore, thank God, I don't do that. But learn to be able to stand up and really be able to say, I forgive that individual. That takes a lot of courage. It's not natural.
I was talking to a guy today, right, and his son got killed in Bedford only last couple of weeks, you know what I mean? And he, you know, he's going on about in his head, he wants to go over there and
Find the individual.
and do them in and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But he doesn't wanna, you know, like
He knows, he does, but he
Yeah.
doesn't, he recognises enough to recognise that's not right. It's not
Yeah.
that's not the right
because
response.
he's saying it. Do you know what I mean? You know, like to take away that thing. Do you know what I mean of it?
To stop him doing it.
Yeah, you know, like it was, and then trying to talk to him in the right kind of way, it's pretty hard.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
It's-
You know?
It's when grief touches your life, and the object of that person who caused the grief is in your sight, it is very, very difficult, I think, to be able to act rationally and act reasonably and act as Christ would want us to act. You know, the natural response is to fight, to do unto them as you would have liked. No, before they do.
We know where you're going.
Yeah,
Craig.
do unto them before they do you. That's so often the situation. I've a neighbour. When he was young, he was bullied at school. Always bullied. Same couple of people, like bigger lads, always bullied him. So he moved from the junior school into what do you call the tech. You know, the 16 to 18 year old.
Senior, really.
Yeah. After the 12 to 15 year old, the 16 to 18.
Yeah.
He moved into there, and it was a totally different school, a nice school, brand new school, and they had a pool room in the school, sixth form. So he was in the pool room, and these two guys come in from his old school. They'd moved up as well, and first time they met in a new environment. And so, of course, the first one, he comes over just to continue as they were before, and you know, to give him a bit of grief. And so, as he saw him coming over, he knew what he was going to do, so he just turned down his pool cue and broke the pool cue over his head. And then the other one, when he got close, he smashed him, because he said, "You're not continuing what I'm going to hit you before you start hitting me again."
Oh.
So he totally, you know, he that was his principle. There was one time it was a motorbike, young lad on a motorbike causing trouble outside his house, and he came storming out the house. I don't know, they hit something in the window or something, and when they're messing about, and this guy had a motorbike. There were a couple of them there, and instead of going for the lads, he just got the motorbike. He happened to have a skip in front of his house. He just picked the motorbike up and threw it in the skip. And he says, you know, you come back and you'll be in the skip. So his attitude from then on was not turn the other cheek. He said, "I'm going to do you before you get the opportunity to do me," which is sad, really, you know. But that's our normal reaction. If we're big enough, you know, if we can get away with it, that's how we would normally react. You know, I want to harm you before you harm. And Jesus just turns that on his head. Don't you hate that? He turns it on his head and he challenges us. Hey, he says, that's how the world reacts. That's how normal reaction is. We're different people. We're blood-bought people. We're people who are going to go to spend our eternity in heaven with God. And what kind of people does God want in his heaven? Does he want those who do others before they do them? Or does he want others who are willing to live in harmony and turn the other cheek? But I'll tell you, it's there, but it's tough. I struggle with it, and you know, I hope you struggle with it too. Because why should I be the only one?
There are things I don't understand in the Bible, but I don't worry about them. I'm more worried about the things I do
I do understand. I know.
Yeah.
That's the problem with these passages. You do know what they mean, and it's bad news. Okay, but it's a good point where you know God shows us the way of escape. God shows us how to deal with stuff rather than react. How about taking time to speak to God in prayer about the situation? And that's got to be a good advice, isn't it? You know, people say count to 10. Well, God says don't even bother counting to 10. Talk to me about it. And when we talk to God about it, because He makes so much more sense, then we can find there's maybe a different solution to this problem. You know, as you said in your sermon on Sunday, you know, Abraham and Lot. You know, let's split this. You know, our hearts been getting each other's way. We're causing each other problem. Okay, look, the older man says, let's do separate our ways in peace and harmony. What do you want? Where do you want to go? And obviously, should have been the Lot should have said, no, not where I want to go. You're the older person. You make a decision. Okay, should have been. And Lot says, instead of doing that, Lot says, well, this is all nice and green over here. I'm going there, and you can have the rest. Oh, you know, it's not our response.
I must admit, I have a bit of sympathy for the Quaker. He stopped a fellow breaking into his house, and he had his shotgun. This is an American, and he said, "I can't swear at thee, and I can't harm thee, but I'm going to shoot at the spot on which thou art standing."
Okay. So if you haven't gone into there in 5 minutes, you'll be
that sort of compromise.
Yes. That's very good. Yeah.
When the Bedfords was over here,
Yeah.
I remember they were living in one of the villages.
Yeah.
And she told me her husband was on night duty, and she said she heard 2 people in the garden. And so she opened the window and she said, I had a gun, because Americans said we feel naked without a gun. And she said, I call out to them to leave. And she said, they just laughed, you're only a woman and we know your husband's not with you.
It's all right.
And she said, but do you know, I've got a gun, you won't use it. She said, I'm an American and I will use it. You've got 2 seconds to get off the garden before I fire. And the pew, it's scattered.
Well, here's maybe an alternative. When I went again back in Northbrook, we had a garage at the bottom of the garden, and I had all my junk in it, which is, well, actually quite valuable stuff, but really other people might describe it as junk. And one night I had a noise, and somebody had broken in about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I caught him in the garage, and I kept him there till 7 o'clock in the morning, till the police, you know, I knew the police would be up and out, and day shift. And by the time I had finished with him, he was pleading for me to hand him over to the police because I was talking him to death. Anyway,
What to do?
what to do? You'll be
never
doing
did
the
it again.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't know whether I cured him or not. But anyway, it's different. All right.
Can we move on?
Yes, we're going to move on. The only problem is, there's more to come. Okay. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Be of the same mind toward one another. Do not be haughty in mind, but associate with the Do not be wise in your own estimation. How much can you pack into 2 sentences? It's just full of stuff, isn't it? Bless those who persecute you. Bless, do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Well, that's good. We quite often, if somebody's happy about something, we're happy. As a matter of fact, sometimes in our lives, that's not what we do. You know, if our next door neighbour gets a brand new car and he's over the moon about it, we've got an old banger and we think, you know, we're not very, why should he get a brand new car? And we're not very happy about it. So even that can be a problem, can it? Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Empathise with people. That's a real problem for some of us, you know, because we all come from different backgrounds. It's difficult sometimes always to identify with the situation somebody else has found themselves in. And for us to maybe recognise, you know, often when we see somebody in trouble, we say, well, they deserve it. See, I've seen the lifestyle. You know, if somebody gets run over or somebody gets beaten up, well, he asked for it. You know, weep with those who weep.
It depends very much on their own experience.
Yes.
A person who has never had a day's illness in his life finds it hard to understand people who are suffering.
That's right. I know, you know, I'm guilty of that. That old illness that used to be around, quite popular, you hardly hear about it now. What's that one where the fatigues? ME. Somebody's, I've got ME. You've got ME? Get a life. Just sort yourself out. I've got a friend, he used to be a manager of Snap-on Tools, an excellent job, but they put pressure on, as you do get in some of those jobs, and basically he just stopped one day, and the doctor said, oh, you've got ME. Well, basically he just didn't want to go in and face the hassle and stress of work anymore, and he's never worked it the rest of his life. And his wife is out there 7 o'clock in the morning, gets back at 6:30 at night, and then has to make his dinner. You know, and I've got ME, you know. And you think, get your life sorted. You know?
It's a sort of grey area though, isn't it?
It is, isn't it?
It's
Yeah.
like it being bipolar these days. That's fashionable.
Well, this is it. Things do come and things. And on the radio the other day, there was a lady who, again, was stressed at work. She was diagnosed with depression and all sorts of stuff. And after about 2 years of trying all the different tablets and things, she realised the tablets weren't doing her any good anyway. And so she forced herself to do a bit of exercise, and it's a bit like a program you use with some of these guys. The very fact of doing the exercise and getting the discipline of doing something actually woke her up back out of the depression. She doesn't get depressed anymore, to the same degree anyway. And so there's an element of that. We see some people and we find it difficult sometimes to be sympathetic towards them because we think they're, you know, malingering or just, you know, whatever other word you want to use.
Some are, there's no question.
And obviously there are elements. Some people are just looking for sympathy. Some people just can't make the effort to do something with their lives. A lot of these teenagers we see in these contracts, the teachers tell you some horrifying stories about the lack of energy that these kids have. They've got a great opportunity and they're just wasting it. You know, you think, sort yourselves out. How can you be sympathetic in a situation like that? So Christ is very practical. He wants us to really identify with people. Paul said it in a different sort of way. He says, "I become all things to all men." That doesn't mean to say that, you know, if you're out drunk, you say, well, I'll join it all, you know. But he does say that in whatever situation you're in, I'm not going to look down on you in that situation. I'm not going to think I'm superior to you because he could have done with his intellect and with all the things Paul had done. There was loads of people he could look down on, but he never did that. He identified with them at their level and communicated with them and treated them as a human being, treated them as an equal, technically. And in that way, he elevates them as well as himself, because he doesn't look down on them. He identifies with them. And this verse 16, be of the same mind towards one another. Don't be haughty, don't be proud to associate with the lowly. Oh, he's beneath me. Or she married beneath her, and he married beneath her. Well, that's very true. But there's an element where, probably in the military, we've seen a few people in the military who have been Christians. I've got a good friend who was a lieutenant colonel in the military, and yet when he enters the church building with these soldiers who are so far beneath him in the military, he doesn't treat them as, you know, here, give me a cup of tea. Or anything like that. It's a one-to-one as a human being. Matter of fact, you would tell us a story, Frank, about there's one of the universities. There was a university professor and a
Southern
cleaner.
California, the two elders.
Yes, the two elders.
Yeah, I knew them. I knew them both well. One was a professor of ancient languages, and the other was a friend of mine, was a janitor. And students were amazed to see these two men walking across the campus together. I mean, they were both Christians. One was just a caretaker. The other was the top professor. And the students were amazed that they were equal.
Yeah.
Talking, you know, as equals. And it's a tremendous ability to have.
Actually, that's when I bought me my first car.
There you go. There you are. Not the janitor, the other one.
The janitor did.
Oh, the janitor did? Were you really?
It was the janitor.
Goodness gracious me. All right. So, it's so easy to feel superior to people. You know, at least I don't. Isn't that a basis of a lot of times when we look at sin? And we look at somebody else's sin and think, oh, look at them, oh, you know. Maybe something that's easily seen, it's something visual. And it's easy to point the finger at. But you remember, when you point the finger that way, what's happening? You
I haven't mobbed on anyone.
you haven't got
Yeah.
it written there, yes,
Five
but
turning
it comes
the other
close.
way.
Yeah, you've at least 3 fingers pointing back.
5.
But, you know, when you're pointing that way, you've got the rest pointing back. Because your sin may not, or their sin may not be your sin, but I guarantee there's nobody who lives on this earth who is without sin of some form,
Yes,
shape
sir.
or form. And so the reality is, as far as God's concerned, with no big sins and little sins, we're all in the same boat. We're all in the same boat. And it's crazy when we're all in the same boat. Well, we're so busy sometimes knocking lumps into each other. That's stupid. Oh dear, oh dear. Okay.
All sinned over the years.
We've all sinned more than just over the years. We all sin, even as sometimes the way we treat each other, sometimes the way we fail to respond to each other, and it is difficult. Do be wise in our own estimation. Isn't that bad? You know how it's an interesting thing in philosophy that everybody believes what they believe is right. You know, even somebody who's a drug addict, when he's in the moment, as far as he's concerned, it's him that's in step, it's all everybody else that's out of step. Because whatever you believe at that particular time, if you didn't believe it, you'd be believing a lie. So you think it's true. Whether it's true or not is irrelevant. So it's very difficult for us to not be wise in our own estimation. And when I think over the years as a Christian, how long it took me to understand some things, and yet how short-tempered I sometimes can be when I'm telling somebody something or sharing somebody something, and they don't see it. You know, what are you, thick? What's your problem? You know, it's as clear as this desk. Why can't you see that? You know, and yet it took me maybe 2-3 years to realise something. And I'm glad that the person who taught me had a little bit more patience than I sometimes show. Isn't that crazy? Wise in our own estimation. We always think we're the ones who know everything, and we're the ones who are right. And at that point, we are, but may not be right in reality. But as far as we're concerned, we're right. And so it's always easy to think we know better. And we are the wiser ones, and these other ones who don't agree with us must be the stupid ones, because they don't know what we know. And that's difficult. How are we doing for time, young man?
We've got about 30 seconds.
Oh, 30 seconds! Oh.
Otherwise we'll phone the police.
Okay.
Oh dear.
I didn't see my clock. What happened to my clock?
It's here.
5 minute mark.
No,
I've got my 5-minute clock here.
There we go.
Anyway,
Now it's time.
all right, okay. It's really challenging. The concept of the love of God and the application of the love of God from our perspective in our lives. God really, He doesn't want us to be complacent. He wants to challenge us, and in any change in any one of our lives, when we change in any way, shape or form, there's always that feeling of unease, because we're leaving what is comfortable and going into what we're not too sure about, until in that position we become more confident. But then we're challenged to move again. And God's constantly challenging us to be better, to be holier, to be purer, to be more compassionate, loving, kind, all these different things. God is constantly wanting us to be the best that we can be. But sadly for a lot of us, we're happy with mediocrity. We're happy with the status quo. We don't want to be challenged. Don't rock the boat. And the good thing about some of these studies is the text is the text. There's the truth of God. And whether we like it or we don't like it, it's there for us to deal with. And hopefully we'll take it and be challenged by it and do something about it. Be more compassionate. Pray for those who despitefully use us. And be more empathetic. Is that a good word? empathise more with other people who don't have perhaps the ability, the experience, there's another word in there, the opportunities that we've had perhaps. And so we need to be able to. Let's frankly just a word of prayer.
Again, Father, at the